The electric type, the type that is associated with the franchise's mascot, home to many stunningly designed Pokemon. Unfortunately, looking cool doesn't actually make you good, as they do face a major problem when it comes to the current meta of competitive Pokemon that completely shuts down most electric types, and this huge flaw will possibly never be resolved and leave the type to be stuck. So let's take a closer look at electric, the type immobilized by the numbers. I'll start by looking at the electric type properties. In the initial generation of Kanto, the electric type was super effective against 2 types and able to resist 2 types. On the other side, 3 types were able to resist electric type attacks, and it only had one weakness, which is to ground. And this will remain electric's only weakness, allowing this type to have the record for least amount of weaknesses at 1, tied with the normal type, whose only weakness is fighting. However, the ground type isn't just super effective against electric, but also immune to electric type attacks. This makes the electric type one of 3 types that holds a weakness to a type that it cannot affect, joining Psychic and Dragon. And as stated in my videos about the Psychic and Dragon type, having such a type reaction causes the type to completely decline. The Psychic used to be a powerhouse in Generation 1, and it's mainly seen now to set up light screens and reflect. As for the Dragon type, it was easily the most powerful type in the first 5 generations, with no one being able to match up against it except itself, until the Fairy type arrived. The Dragon type is still prevalent today since they have a large arsenal of legendary Pokemon, but this dominance they have nowadays isn't as monumental as it was back then. Electric falls to the same problem, but it might just be worse than the other 2 since ground is the most common attacking type compared to either Fairy or Dark, since ground holds the record for most amount of super effective advantages by a singular type at 5. The electric type does gain another resistance however in Generation 2 with the introduction of Steel. This makes the typing overall pretty good, if all types were seen evenly that is. But as we all know, the move Earthquake is seen basically everywhere, even on Pokemon who don't even have the ground typing. So sometimes it's tough to use an electric type Pokemon in battle. Now let's see if the electric type has any positive growth with its stats or frequency across the years that may aid in the previously mentioned problems. Just know the following calculation is only considering regular and regional forms, not megas or alternative forms. The electric type had a phenomenal start in Kanto with them releasing 9 electric type Pokemon, and for the most part they were pretty strong, coming out with an average base stat total of 446. This allowed it to rank as being the 4th highest average out of all types in Kanto, alongside the fact Electrode was the fastest Pokemon from the Kanto region, and it helped Electric rank as being the fastest type on average in the Kanto region. Moving forward, we get in the Johto region. In this region, we see another 8 electric Pokemon, including the legendary Raikou. But due to all the baby Pokemon, this region comes out with the lowest base stat average for electric types of all time at 386. Next up is Hoenn, possibly the most disappointing release of electric Pokemon. This region only released 4 electric types, and although this isn't the fewest amount released in a singular region, it is the lowest concentration of electric type Pokemon in a given region, with less than 3% of all Pokemon in Hoenn being affiliated with the electric type. Not only that, but these Pokemon were also just straight up bad, having an average base stat of 395, which is only ahead of Johto's average, alongside being the lowest base stat average of electric types across all regions when only including for final stage evolutions. The only redeeming factor that the electric type has in this region is that somehow they still manage to on average have the highest speed stat amongst all types in Hoenn. The electric type finally starts to charge things back up in the next generation of Sinnoh. This generation saw 7 electric types, and as stated earlier, alternate forms don't count, so only Rotom base form is being counted, and the average base stat amongst these Pokemon is 438. We then head into the Unova region, where for the first time we see a double-digit amount of electric Pokemon released in a singular region, one of which being Zekrom, who still stands as being the electric type with the highest base stat out of them all. With its help, the average base stat of all these Pokemons ends up at 449. However, we yet again see lowlights of the electric type in the Kalos region, releasing only 3 Pokemon, making it the fewest amount out of any region. And these 3 weren't that powerful either, having an average base stat total of 400. But it sparks back up in the Alola region, releasing 6 electric types, with it being the best group out of them all. The average base stat of these 6 Pokemon came to 513, which is the only time the average base stat of electric Pokemons for a given region surpassed the 500 stat mark. Alongside this, the electric type was both the type with the highest average speed and average special attack across all types in Alola. We then head to Galar, where we are introduced to 9 new electric type Pokemon. And yeah, they're pretty chill. The average of these Pokemon come to 441. But then we head into the final region of Paldea, seeing 12 electric type Pokemon. This is the most amount of electric types released in a singular region, and it also easily allows Paldea to have the highest concentration of electric type Pokemon as well, being the only region that had 10% or more of all the Pokemon they released being affiliated with the electric typing. Alongside this, they released some crazy strong Pokemon, such as the Paradox Pokemon, a very common theme in these videos, and the average base stat of this group is 466, which is already fairly high enough, but the average of just the final stage electric Pokemon comes up to 556, which causes Paldea to lead against all regions on being the highest. In total, the final surge causes the electric type to have an overall base stat of 442. When we're also counting the 6 regional form electric Pokemon, the average drops to 440. And overall, the electric type hasn't seen much changes from its initial start despite the existence of power creep. The frequency of electric type Pokemon also sees a similar pattern, to there being the same amount of released electric type now as back then. But since the overall amount of Pokemon have been decreasing, this means that the rate at which we see electric types has actually risen, with there being less than 6% of all Pokemon affiliated with the electric type in Kanto, with now there being almost 7% of all Pokemon being electric type. Of course, with the 6 regional form Pokemon added to the count as well, 75 out of 1080 regular and regional form Pokemon are associated with the electric type, which allows it to hover at the 7% mark. However, this lack of overall growth doesn't solve its most potent problem, which is its inability to deal with the devastating ground type. Because unlike the electric type, the ground type actually have been getting stronger over the years, which allows there to be more powerful counters to electric Pokemon. So with this being said, what playstyle does the electric type rely on? Looking more in depth of its stats, it's ranked as having the 3rd highest average speed and 4th highest average special attack, according to Pokemon Database. This makes it the only type that ranks in the top 5 for both of these categories alongside Dragon. But Dragon doesn't count because they abuse legendary Pokemon. Fake stats. But with stats like these, they are expected to perform like special sweepers. After all, the Pokemon with the highest special attack and speed stat in the franchise are both mono electric types. When you look at the electric types ranking in the other categories, however, you can basically see that it kinda has no choice but to be a special sweeper in most cases, with the type on average having relatively low bulk, leaving a limited number of electric types to even have some type of defensive playstyle. The electric type's desire to be a fast type is also shown with his status condition known as Paralyzed, which cuts Pokemon inflicted with his status speed stat in half, with there also being a 25% chance to skip their turn entirely. And also, electric types are immune to this status, although that was a more recent addition to this condition. Now we will look at the moves the electric type uses. In terms of damage, the most common option for special attack is Thunderbolt, a move with 90 base power, 100 accuracy, and a chance to inflict paralysis. While the best physical move is Wild Charge, a move that also has 90 power and 100 accuracy. But instead of a chance of inflicting paralysis, it's a guarantee to take recoil damage instead. If the stats weren't enough evidence already, then maybe this is, for why electric should always be used as a special attacker. But what about Zekrom? It's an electric type that uses electric type physical attacks. Bro, Zekrom got a signature attack known as Fusion Bolt that is stronger than Wild Charge without the recoil. I'm talking about in general. The next 2 highest physical attack by an electric type are Pokemon that can rely on other physical attacks that isn't Wild Charge. Anyways, alongside these 2 moves, there are also an additional 2 other moves that electric type Pokemon likes to use. The first one is Thunder Wave, the electric type primary go-to move to intentionally inflict paralysis. I know Nuzzle is better, having more accuracy and actually dealing damage, but only a select few amount of Pokemon can even learn it. So until it becomes more accessible, Thunder Wave is still the #1 option for the paralyzed condition. As for the final move electric likes to use, well, that's a Volt Switch, a move with 70 base power that enables you to perform a switch. This is a very good attack for the electric type, as they can utilize their high speed to deal damage before changing to a better type advantage. This is of course better than just switching manually and not getting any damage at all. But as a reoccurring problem, this move won't work against ground type Pokemon. So if they predict that before your turn to attack, then you might be in some trouble. Especially if you have to go against an Arena Trap Dugtrio, then you might as well just forfeit the match. And for anyone wondering, Electro Ball did not get snubbed out of a spot. It's just weaker than Thunderbolt unless your Pokemon's speed stat is triple that of the enemy, which is something you can't really rely on. But there is one way the electric type can deal with its ground type liability, and that's to pair up with other types to either just be better in general or to counter the ground weakness. Let's look at overall typing first. In Wolfie's video about all dual type combination, the worst 3 types that electric could be paired up with is rock, fire, and grass. Fortunately for electric, this combination has only been used 3 times across all final staged Pokemon. If we include for alternate forms, another 2 Pokemon has such a typing, but as mentioned in my fire type video, Heat Form Rotom removes its quad ground weakness with the ability Levitate. Mold Form Rotom also removes the neutral ground damage, but the typing is still pretty bad. Looking at the other side, we get the 3 best combinations, which were Electric Flying, Electric Fighting, and Electric Fairy. These combinations were seen 8 out of 28 times from all final stage dual type electric Pokemon, which is a considerable amount. And the most as seen of these 3 combinations was Electric Flying, which has 4 Pokemon. This typing is very good as the Flying type alleviates the Electric type from its ground suffering. Regardless, it also shows that the Electric type gets paired up with good typing overall. But as for defeating the ground typing, well, it doesn't really have one that is particularly fast and dominant. But maybe it will one day. But let's finally see how much the electric type is actually impeded by ground when we look at the competitive performance of electric type Pokemon. Just know the data collected for this part is from Pikalytics and was extracted on May 23rd, 2025. Pokemon usages could have increased or decreased from when you are watching this video. We'll start as usual with the Uber tier. The electric type Pokemon that has the highest usage rate is Raging Bolt, which ranked at 41st, with a less than 2% usage rate, meaning nobody uses it. And it's hard to use it since its top 2 most used attacks are both electric type, and there happens to exist 5 separate ground type Pokemon in the top 30 for usage rate in Uber that is immune to Raging Bolt's best moves. There also exist 5 Pokemon in the top 30 usage rate that uses Earthquake in their moveset, which would absolutely decimate all electric types that don't have a way to mitigate the damage. The next 3 most used electric types in Ubers was Arceus Electric, Regieleki, and Zekrom. All get stuffed by the ground type as well, as their main source of damage are electric attacks, which does nothing to these Pokemon. So basically, in the Uber tier, the electric type is doo-doo. But of course, I can't move on from this section without mentioning the strongest electric type of all, Miraidon. It was so dominant that it got banned from the Ubers format and placed in Anything Goes. Now, let's keep it real. The reason Miraidon was banned is not because it's an electric type, but because it was built to obliterate the competition. If we look at the current number 1 used Pokemon in the Uber tier, we see Koraidon, which is Miraidon's counterpart, who is currently in discussions to possibly also get banned in Ubers. What these Pokemon have is similar to Crown Form Zacian back in Generation 8, having insane speed and offensive stat, matched with an ability that constantly boosts their offensive powers even further. The same mechanic was the reason why Crown Form Zacian was also banned in Generation 8, where it then got a slight nerf to its attack stat, and its ability is only a one-time use. Even with those nerfs, a diabolical build like that still allows it to rank as being the 2nd most used Pokemon currently in Uber. Now going back to just Koraidon and Miraidon, these 2 Pokemon abilities also enhances their damage output further with their field effects. Koraidon boosting fire attacks with the sun, and Miraidon boosting electric attack with electric terrain. And the thing that separates these 2 is that A, Miraidon's field effect is enhancing its signature stab move, while Koraidon's isn't, so it does even more damage. And B, Miraidon's damage, since it's a special attacker, can't be crippled by the burn status. Had Koraidon been a fire dragon instead of fighting dragon, and collision course been a fire type attack, it would be immune to the burn status that halves its attack stat, and also have been banned already. Probably even faster than Miraidon, since the damage boost from the sun is more than the damage boost from electric terrain, and it wouldn't take any damage at all from burn, since it's immune to it. What I'm getting at is that the reason why Miraidon is banned is because its stats and abilities are so above and beyond everyone else, and not because of its electric typing. If it was Water Dragon that sets up rain, it would have also came to the same conclusion. These hyper offensive Pokemon are just unhealthy to the game. But last thing I want to say about Miraidon before I move on is its ability to deal with ground type efficiently. For one, it has a Stab Draco Meteor, which when matched with the Hadron Engine's effect is stronger than Raging Bolt's Draco Meteor, even when it has Photosynthesis activated. And it does this with a huge speed difference, by the way, so it doesn't even have to worry about being outsped, unlike Raging Bolt. And the second way it deals with ground types is that it has access to Solar Beam, which will be launched in a single turn due to Koraidon being prevalent in almost all teams anyways. Raging Bolt also has Solar Beam, but once again, it has to deal with its low speed stat, and it does so by opting to use its signature move Thunderclap in its moveset instead of Solar Beam, which then leaves it without a way of effectively fighting ground Pokemon. Anyway, that's enough uber tier rambling. Let's look at the other formats. In the OU format, the ground type is still seen 5 times from a Pokemon in the top 30 for usage rate, with the most used Pokemon in this tier being Iron Treads. But this matched with the removal of big name legendaries causes one electric type to sneak into the top 30 ranking, which is of course Raging Bolt, the number 1 electric option in Ubers. It's able to place higher simply because the pool of overall Pokemon is weaker. If we extend this list from looking at the top 30s to top 50s, we see one more electric type, that being Zapdos, who has an immunity to ground type attacks, still showing that electric types in this format faces difficulties just because of the existence of something else. This is so easily visible in the monotype format, which is a format that involves forming a team that all share a common type. I've made numerous videos before of other types and their performance in this format, and which types complete a full team composition the fastest. Typically, Steel, Dragon, Dark, and Flying are the ones that have all 6 slots filled first, and at the bottom is normally Ice, Rock, or Bug. But in the month of May, and looking at the current Pikalytic statistics, the ground type was the 3rd complete roster, having the 6th most used ground Pokemon in this format in the 25th usage rank. This rise also coincidentally causes the electric type to have the worst usage of all types, requiring 125 slots for it to see a full team composition of Pokemon, undeniably showing that the electric types is controlled solely by the frequency of the ground type. But in Doubles OU, we finally start to notice some changes in behavior. Due to the nature of double battles and the Earthquake ability to target the entire field, it gets substituted with weaker ground attacks such as Earth Power or Stomping Tantrum to avoid any self-inflicted damage. This means that no ground type Pokemon in the top 30 for OU doubles even uses Earthquake for their moveset, which reduces the overall offense of ground in general. This allows for 2 electric type Pokemon to place in the top 20 for usage rate for OU doubles, where although that they don't have a means of beating them, they do however have better survivability due to the circumstances of a double battle. We'll go even further, looking at the 2025 VGC Regulation Set I Showdown stats. The top 3 used Pokemon in this format are Calyrex Shadow Rider, Urshifu Rapid Strike, and Rillaboom. And I guess these 3 Pokemon scare the ground typing away, as there is no ground type Pokemon who ranks in the top 25 for usage rate in this format, allowing for a huge gateway for electric Pokemon to show up, in which they did, with there being 3 of them in the top 15 for usage rate. All it took for electric to show signs of dominance is the removal of one of the most famous attack in Pokemon. But what do you guys think? Will there ever be a time in Pokemon where a move such as Earthquake isn't being spammed? Or perhaps will a new move be created that gives electric type a chance to fight back against ground Pokemon so that they can compete in singles format? Or will the electric type be stuck in a predicament where its effectiveness is completely dependent on the usages of another type and remain the type immobilized by the numbers?